Welcome back, everybody, to Neutrality Studies. Today, I am joined by Professor Dr. Irfan Ahmad, a professor of anthropology and sociology at the Ibn Khaldun University in Istanbul. Professor Ahmad actually studied also for 5 years at the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Religious and Ethnic Diversity in Göttingen, and he recently wrote a very interesting paper on Habermas as an ethnic thinker par excellence, on critique, Palestine, and the role of intellectuals. In this paper, he discusses Habermas' philosophy, and Mr. Habermas, of course, has died only recently on the 14th of March this year, and he's one of Germany's first and foremost kind of intellectuals of our day, or was an intellectual of our day. But there were very serious problems when it comes to the approach of other religions, and especially to the Gaza genocide. And this is what we want to discuss today. So, Professor Ahmad, welcome.
Thank you, Pascal. It is lovely to be in conversation with you, and I'm glad that we will have some interesting discussion about Habermas, his role as a public intellectual, but also his relevance for our time, especially the time of the war, and so on and so forth.
Can we start with that one? Can you give us your interpretation of Habermas as a philosopher and as a public intellectual in Germany, and how important is he in Germany?
Well, as you know, the Chancellor of Germany made a tweet about his death and describing how important he was. It is true, and that in Germany, where I worked as a senior research fellow at Max Planck Institute for 5 years almost, it is true that when Habermas spoke in an auditorium, the whole auditorium used to be full.
Mm.
So people, not simply intellectuals, but also, as you know, Habermas was also initially a journalist. So he used to write for newspapers, make comments about political issues, public issues. So he's not an ivory type of intellectual. He also intervened in public debates. So he was very crucial for Germany, but not simply Germany, also beyond Germany. So you have the Spanish newspaper like El País, which in 2023 described Habermas, and I have this written, the most famous living philosopher in the world.
Right.
Okay. And also Europe's greatest intellectual. So this is just one of the many descriptions. Various people have described him and his work differently. Some as a cosmopolitan philosopher, and so on and so forth. So in Germany, of course, he's very important in terms of teaching, research, public debate. People would write about him, discuss whether in agreement or disagreement, So in that sense, some even say that he's the last great rationalist philosopher.
Mm.
Okay.
And the important thing about him is that he achieved that level of fame within the Hall of Fame of German philosophers while alive, right? And Habermas was born in 1929. He died, I think, at the age of 96. So he wrote a tremendous amount of works and spoke publicly, and so his impact on today's Germany's understanding of itself as a state that produces still great intellectuals is Habermas is very important to that, isn't he?
True. But then one has to also see, because as you know, there are many ways to read Habermas. One reading is, and this is not simply intellectuals or activists within Germany, but also well beyond Germany, okay, in Europe, in North America, to see his writing and thinking in the tradition of left scholarship or left thinking. It is true, but we have to make a distinction that this is a typically Western Marxism. And this Western Marxism is not the same as form of thinking or Marxism in other parts of the world. So Marxism, as it operates in Latin America, in Asia, Southeast Asia, and in the Middle East. Okay, so he's surely placed in that left tradition, but it is a Western Marxism. Okay, uh, and this is because the Frankfurt School itself, as you know, it was established in 1923. And this was in response to Russian Revolution in 1917. So a few years um, after the Bolshevik Revolution. Okay, so this was the ways in which the German intellectuals at that time responded. So the point is not that it has nothing to do with Marxism elsewhere. Of course, it had, you know, but the core of it is the concern of Europe, and then an understanding of Marxism from European perspective or Western perspective.
Hey, very brief intermission because I was recently banned from YouTube, and although I'm back, this can happen anytime again. So please consider subscribing not only here, but to my mailing list on Substack. That's pascalotta.substack.com. The link's going to be in the description below, and now back to the video. What's the big difference between the Western and the Eastern or the rest, the other interpretations of Marxism, just in a nutshell?
Yeah, so one would be like in the 80s and 90s, if you talk to a left activist in India, okay, and if you spoke about ecological problem or hygiene in the city and so on and so forth, most likely a Marxist in Delhi or in Bombay might tell you that this is a very bourgeois concern because we are concerned about bread and butter. There are people who cannot afford a meal's day, and you are talking about ecological issues. Okay, so which is not to say that they were opposed to it, but in terms of question of priority, because from their perspective, unless this hardcore economic imbalance is addressed, okay, or the question of imperialism, this is very interesting because you see the the first generation Frankfurt School theorist, Horkheimer, his response to question of imperialism was not how Marxists in other parts of the world saw it. And what I want to say here is this: in 1956, when Jamal Abdul Nasser was leader of NAM, I mean, one of the leaders of non-aligned movements. So when he nationalized Suez Canal,
Yes.
okay, it was greeted by left or left-oriented intellectuals in the non-Western world differently. The Western press described Nasser as Hitler, as new Mussolini.
Yeah.
Okay, and I want to say this. So this is a joint statement both by Adorno and Horkheimer to the 1956 nationalization of Suez canals. Okay. By the way, Horkheimer and Adorno, these are the two leading intellectuals of the first generation.
Yeah.
They were not necessarily on the same page. They also had internal differences. Okay. Horkheimer was considered more orthodox. Okay. But this is the statement that they jointly issued, and it reads as follows: these Arab robber states have been on the lookout for years of an opportunity to fall upon Israel and to slaughter the Jews who have found refuge there. This is a statement in 1956.
Of the Frankfurt School, of the first generation of people who are generally considered left in the intellectual discourse in Europe.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it.
Now, you might also
Should we call them the Zionist left? Is this does Zionism have something to do with that, or why did they write something like that?
But Pascal, you might be even surprised that Horkheimer later on, if this is the left, there is another quote where he says, I believe that Europe and America are probably the best civilization that history produced up to now, as far as prosperity and justice are concerned. So many of this is Horkheimer, okay? Now, the question is, many of the scholars and intellectuals after Habermas's death, they say that, well, Habermas made some deviation from Marxism. And then the assumption is that the early generation, like Horkheimer and Adorno, they were really truly left, okay? And Habermas is making some kind of departure. But the point is, it is not a departure if you read it this way, you know, if Horkheimer thinks that the Europe and America are probably the best civilization, then no. So the way they say it, that the assumption is that Horkheimer was more radical and Habermas became less.
Yeah.
But that is not how it is.
And, sorry to the audience listening, because we should maybe have prefaced this with an information about how Habermas was vocal in the last 2 years about the genocide in Gaza. I mean, how he framed the everything that was happening around Israel and Palestine. Could you maybe explain that to us, Irfan? Like, how did what did he say in his last years of his life also about Israel and Palestine?
Yeah, so you see, the event happened on October 7th, and I think after 5 weeks, he issued a statement with 3 other scholars, okay? And most of them were his students or people he had worked with. And in that statement, it is called Principles of Solidarity, okay?
Solidarity with Israel.
The title is simply Principles of Solidarity. It doesn't mention Israel or Palestine, but within the statement, what is important that he says that people who are saying that it is a genocidal war, they are in error. Okay, so for him, it was not a genocide. This is one point. The second point is he was concerned about, and this is very important for your listeners and viewers to take note of, that much like Immanuel Kant, Habermas, their thinking is state oriented. So in Germany, it is called Staatsräson. Okay, so after World War II, it is the official policy of the German state that the viability and the integrity of the German state is predicated upon the safety and integrity of Israel as a new state.
Yep.
So whatever he's saying, he's connecting it because in making that statement, he takes it as his responsibility to also defend the state of Israel. And my question was that as an intellectual, should you be concerned about defending another state? And this in itself is very interesting, that as a German citizen, and the whole question, as you know, your field is international relation and so on and so forth. So we talk about national sovereignty and so on and so forth. So to what extent it is an exercise of Germany's national sovereignty, in which you are making a statement not about your own sovereignty, but the integrity and sovereignty of another nation state. Okay? And then in the statement, he says that, there is rising anti-Semitism, which is true, but he says nothing about Islamophobia, because as we know, after 9/11, the whole world has seen massive rise of Islamophobia, including in Germany.
Yeah.
When I lived there. So it was a very selective, okay, a statement. He describes in that statement, he talks about Jews in terms of Jewish life. Palestinians are mentioned, but he uses the word population.
Palestinian population versus Jewish life.
Jewish life. Okay. And we can go into the semantic and lexical things. Population is also used to describe the non-human world, animal world. Okay. So there is no concern about Palestine, but more importantly, what was baffling to me, he takes that October 7th incident as if nothing happened before.
Yeah. Yep. I mean,
Okay?
that's what we experienced all over the West, that basically our media, our politicians, everybody started focusing on October 7th. I remember, and I'm sorry that I'm interjecting here, I just remember reading in the New York Times on October 8th or 9th, when they recounted what happened, that they used the sentence, the Israelis thought it was live and let live, but they were wrong. The terrorists want to get them. It's like, this live and let live, as if though that had been the case before. But we were all told the world started on October 7th, and Habermas in his statement and so on, he directly played into that understanding of October 7th, didn't he?
Right. And this is baffling simply because, as a philosopher, it would be wrong to assume that he's not aware of the history.
Yeah, and as a
Okay?
person who was at the time 93 years old, I mean, he has seen all of
Right.
it with his own eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, or lived through
Right.
it, right? But okay, please continue.
So, if our assumption is correct that he is not unaware of it, then not mentioning it or not going into the historical fact, that looks like it is a choice not to talk about history. And this itself, from in his own words, if his project, as you know, he has described in many places, that modernity is an unfinished project, and we have to conduct our debate in a rational, argumentative mode. Then the question is, what kind of enlightened, rational debate it is when you simply wipe the history out? Okay, so it is a completely dehistoricized, decontextualized way of making that a statement. But I think it is not simply a question of omission, I would say, and this is something that gets connected to the whole issue of Western Marxism that we talked about in the beginning. In the whole writing, but let me make a qualification that I have read Habermas in English, because in Germany, you will also find that if German intellectuals disagree with you, the immediate thing that they will bring to your attention is that, but you have not read him in original. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I've read him in translation. Okay, and then there will be question of interpretation, comma, full stop, semicolon, and
This is very this is
okay.
this is very, very typical of German language philosophy, which is very much considered with making sentences as complicated as possible and then priding themselves on being a few who actually understand that. I mean, Immanuel Kant is the epitome of that. But yes, so but let's put that aside. I mean, good translations, a good philosopher should be translatable. But
Right.
please continue.
So the point is, uh, the fact that he did not mention history. Okay, but then we are not simply talking about history. We are talking about a particular kind of history, which is the history of settler colonialism. And in the entire writings of of Habermas's philosophy, colonialism and imperialism is not a central category. So I also wonder how you can write a philosophy of modern period in which imperialism and colonization are not central.
How about the Frankfurt School itself? Because I'm not familiar with the import all of their writings. Like, is colonialism and settler colonialism and imperialism, is it actually a construct that they use, or is it concepts that they use in order to make sense of the modern world, or are they themselves as an entire group of researchers kind of just turning a blind eye to this?
I mean, to answer to your question, I think a more precise answer would be like investigating the writings of all these philosophers individually as well as collectively. But my larger point is, as I told you about the joint statement of Adorno and Horkheimer to the incident of 1956, nationalization of Suez Canal by Gamal Abdel Nasser. No, there. I don't think. I mean, one fundamental text is, as you know, when World War II was still ongoing. So one of the central texts of Frankfurt School is the Dialectic of Enlightenment, jointly written by Adorno and Horkheimer. And given the nature of that time, it was not published in Germany. Okay, it was published in Holland. By the way, there is a country where I did my PhD in anthropology. Now, that is considered as a monumental text of Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. It is a very critical book in which they say that, look, Enlightenment has turned into a mythology. Okay, so it was supposed to demythologize the world. Okay, but it is a very strong critique of Western reason, because later on, what will become central to Frankfurt School of Critical Theory is culture, industry, and instrumental reason. So, against the normative assumption of Enlightenment being reason-oriented and something that it will lead to the betterment of humanity, what we see is a catastrophe. But even in that book, what is surprising is that they do not mention the past and the present colonization of the world.
Yep.
Okay, so they put reason as opposite of mythology, and then they go to the ancient Greek myth, from where they take this opposite. So I think that move is not necessarily bad. Okay, it is one way to look at it, but they could have also, along with that move, also talked about the colonization of Africa, the colonization of America, because the whole point of reason, rationality, how did this play up in the realm of colonization and imperialism? So this is not a, in my view, in Habermas's thinking, colonization and secular colonialism is not a major. It is not a concern at all. But also, very quickly, because if he talks about establishment of Israel as a secular colonial project, that will go against the German national policy. Because after World War II, the German state's policy is to support, work, and defend the state of Israel, and not talk about how it came into being.
Yep. Yep. And you're laying your finger on a very, very, very important issue that the Europeans and the Americans, that the political West, as Richard Sarkwas calls it, is even on the within civil society. I mean, on all layers, absolutely colonialism blind. Colonialism doesn't figure as an important explanatory variable for the current world. And this is true in media, it is true in public education, it is true, as you are now pointing out, even among the topmost philosophers on the left side of the spectrum that do not use colonialism as a prism through which to understand world politics. Completely, it's out to most people. Colonialism, to most people in Europe, colonialism is akin to feudalism. We know it was bad. We know it was how the world used to work, but we stopped that a long time ago. There was a war in the United States in order to abolish slavery, and luckily the forces of good won over the forces of evil, and slavery was abolished, and we never did that again, right? And we're clean of sin, and as Mr. Borrell would say, like, we are now a garden, right? We have a garden that needs to be protected. And this prism, this absolute forgetting about colonialism, not forgetting, but active ignoring of that. I think it is actually hard for a good part of the rest of the world, for the global south, for people in Asia, in Africa, and in South America to understand just to which level that the Europeans and the Americans just do not use colonialism as a way to understand where we are in world politics today, which is why there's such a huge divide on the understanding also what the Israeli project is about. But sorry, that's just a parenthesis just to underline how important this observation of yours is.
Sure. So I think the two broad trends are either you don't talk about it, erase it, okay?
Yeah.
And when you talk about it as if it was something which happened long time ago. But my point is the question of sectoral colonialism, it is not something which happened in the past. It is also a question of the present.
Yes.
Okay. So in the Western public sphere, remember Jacques Chirac. I will have to check the year, but probably it is mid 1990s. He extolled the role of French imperialism by saying that the good work that the French did it in Algeria.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And after 9/11, you also have this British historian called Niall Ferguson,
Yeah.
who now has moved to the US. And he used to write, I think, a column for Newsweek
Yeah. Yeah.
or Time. Okay. And there he says that no, we should not be talking about colonialism as a question of subordination. He said that no, we should be talking about colonialism as collaboration between the Europeans and the non-Europeans. Okay. And then he also says that imagine, so it is, I think you probably would be fluent in German, French, and Italian as well, or Spanish. So I think
a little bit.
so in French, and you will have to forgive me for my excellent French pronunciation. It is called colonialism positif.
Colonialism,
so positive.
Yeah, positive colonialism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Niall Ferguson also says that if and this is aimed to those people who are critical of colonialism, saying that no, you should not be, because in his view, what would the world look like if there was no English? It is because of English language, like as you know, I'm citizen of India, so English is the language, and it is also the language of democracy for them, education, and so on and so forth. So without colonialism, okay, this would not have been possible. And colonialism is not a relation of subordination, but collaboration between the British and the natives. So this is one way in which they talk about colonialism. Either erase it, or when you talk about it, okay, you minimize its the havoc that it has created or inflicted the world over. And my point, by the way, as an anthropologist, I'm very aware of the fact that, of course, it has done. It has inflicted havoc on the Northwest, but we should not be forgetting that it has also devastated society, culture, and human subjectivity within the West as well.
For example, like what are you thinking of?
So, I mean, to the extent that if you take the question of Ireland,
Yeah. I mean, inner European colonialism, or inner European like dominance over relationships of abusive dominance, right? The way that also Malta was colonized, and other states, or the way that Europe at the moment is absolutely exploiting Ukraine to fight a war, a war for
Right.
him, like that kind of devastation, right?
Definitely. But I also want to add to this that, for example, there was one British colonial officer called General Dyer, Michael Dyer, who was involved in a very brutal massacre in India.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you recruit people, okay, from your own country, okay, and then you deploy them outside.
Yeah.
Now, I think I do not, unlike Hobbes, I don't begin with the assumption that human nature is necessarily evil. So if I begin with the assumption that General Dyer is not necessarily a bad person by birth, so then you misinform him, you change his subjectivity, okay, uh, in which he begins to treat people or humans who are like him, but then you start demonizing these people either through the language of civilized or uncivilized, or as whatever. There was also another term called gentus versus civilized. So my point is that these colonial officers who were taken from the Western society, they are also brainwashed, or if you want to use another word, okay, so they are robbed of their own humanity in a way that they cannot identify themselves with the humans in the non-Western world and see the point of connectivity. They begin to treat them as other, as enemy, as something undesirable, as something outsider. And in that sense, it is so. The point is, colonization is not simply bad for the colonized. I would say that it is also bad or catastrophic for the colonizers themselves, because it robs you also of your own humanity. You are made to lose a sense of your empathy and sympathy.
Yes, I mean, if you do this, you end up. I mean, yeah, we saw what the Nazis did. We saw how that part of German society in the end was forced to regret the kind of inhumanity that they themselves inflicted on others, right? And this happens time and time again within these colonial empires. The question is whether they learned a lesson or not. But can we maybe focus a little bit on your critique again on of Habermas as an ethnic thinker? Can you tell me like how you understand him and he in this sense stands as an example of how Europe would like to think of itself as enlightened. But I think the underlying critique can be like, no, if this is enlightenment, then it's not a very bright light, if this is what it is. And this ethnic thinker aspect, can you explain that a bit?
Right. So the one way I use the word ethnic is in relation to the claims about universal. So it is not simply the individual philosophy or writings of Habermas, but the Enlightenment thought itself is considered by many as universal. Okay. Now, I was interested in what is the meaning of universal. Okay. So when we say something is universal, then what exactly it means? So one rendition of what is universal is that something which is open or applicable to everyone. Okay. And this is what is the Western meaning of universal. What it misses is that something which you think is open to everyone, does it also come from everyone?
Mm, good point.
Okay. So my point is this, that the Western way of theorizing and philosophizing is not the only way in which humanity in its diversity has thought about what means to have a good life or what it means to be a good person, because these are the philosophical questions.
Yes.
Right? People outside of the West, in Africa, in Buddhist world, in Islamic world, they have also thought about what it means to be a human. What is the idea of a good society, for example? Of course, in Greek philosophy, you have the king philosopher concept. In Islamic tradition, Farabi wrote about the virtuous city, and so on and so forth. So my point is, if universalism, or in the case of either Habermas, but it applies to Immanuel Kant as well, and by extension to the whole of the Western modern philosophy, that if by universal you mean only something which is typically Western / Christian, which is open to everyone, but you do not ask the question that what you are presenting to the world has also come from different quarters of the world. So if you do not take universal as also from everyone, then a necessary consequence of this would be that it will become a missionary project, in the sense that you want to convert, and I use the word conversion not necessarily in religious sense. Okay, so to convert the rest of the world, which is not European or Western, into your own image. Okay, so a true meaning of universalism would be not simply that whatever I am giving is available to everyone, but it should also come from everyone.
Yep.
And we do not have that thing, and that requires that, okay, we for my critique of universalism as not simply to all but from all. Now, this would require that people like Habermas, okay, will have to read not simply Immanuel Kant and Voltaire and Hobbes and Locke. They also need to read the philosophy of Africa, the philosophy of Islamic world, philosophy of the uh, Buddhist world or the Hindu world, which he has not done.
Yep.
Okay, because the true universalism would be possible only when we have the conversation among them, and then we bring something or we put it on the table that, okay, this is I mean, the world is not homogeneous. We know it. It is so obvious. So in that sense, I say that people or the philosophy like Habermas is ethnic because it represents a particular viewpoint on the world, on the human nature, or on the individual or the human subjectivity. It is not universal in that sense, because I do not think that the way Max Weber wrote about human beings or modern civilization, that is the only way of being in the world, or the way Habermas thinks about rationality and so on and so forth. There are also other ways of thinking about humans and human subjectivity, including what kind of world we want to live in. And therefore, my point is that it is not universal, but it is an ethnic way of philosophizing or thinking.
This is, I like that, because usually the term ethnic is something that Europeans and Americans apply to others, right? It's like ethnic food, or the go and even the study itself of anthropology is like very has always has this issue of how to approach the fact that it's usually done from the perspective of the white population of the Europeans, then going out and studying the others, right? You create this problem between you and the other. But if we try to understand Habermas and the Europeans as I mean, a certain group of thinkers as ethnically rooted within their ethnic understanding of the world, I think that's quite valuable. And could you in the end make sense of Habermas and how he then approached Palestine, Israel, and this, in a sense, a really kind of, I think if in 20, 30 years we look back at these statements, they will look so out of touch with reality. I mean, already now they look to me out of touch, but they will look even more out of touch in the very near future. Um, is it this element, this absolute kind of rejection even of a large part of European intellectuals to engage with some of the most fundamental issues of the global south or the rest of the world, and something as fundamental as colonialism? Is that the issue?
Right. So let me say this: your observation about when people think of the term ethnic, it is about ethnic food and so on and so forth. That is quite true. I used to teach at Monash University in Australia, and with local Australian friends, we would make the Australian friends would say that let's go and have ethnic food today. So that meant going to an area which is called Dandino, and there were a lot of Afghanis there.
Yeah.
So it meant Afghani naan and kebab.
Yep.
So you may have, what is the national food of Australia? Chips and potatoes or whatever. So ethnic food means like, okay, we are thinking about Vietnamese food is described as ethnic, or the Afghani food. And my point was, no, we need to probably reverse it. Because when we describe Vietnamese or Afghani food as ethnic, then we think that whatever the white Australian people think is the universal or that is a norm, right?
Yeah, and a norm in Australia, which, like, funnily enough, I'm pretty sure the Aborigines of like 500-600 years ago wouldn't have thought of fish and chips as local Australian food. I'm pretty sure about that. But okay, please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so now back to your the second part of the question, which is about 20 years down the line, what would we make of Habermas, right? Now, of course, as you know, and I'm also somebody who is interested in what is known as intellectual history. Okay, some people also use the word called history of ideas. So, if we see in the past, it is possible that a figure is interpreted and reinterpreted again and again, and sometimes that interpretation or reinterpretation can be quite opposite as well. So if somebody is taken as defender of something, it is quite possible that later on his thinking or his image through an act of reinterpretation can be reversed. Okay, so anyway, that we have to see how it will happen 20 years or 30 years from now. But I want to make one point, which is to see that if our present or past is in any way some kind of pointer to the future which is about to come. Now, there are elements. So I want to make this point very sharply, namely that many people in America or Europe, they think of Habermas as a philosopher of consensus. He's the one who talked about discourse ethics. He's also known as philosopher of consensus. Okay, debate and so on and so forth. He's also projected as somebody who revived the Kantian idea of a cosmopolitan world. His famous essay called Perpetual Peace. By the way, the exact translation is not actually, according to a German scholar, it should not be perpetual peace. It should be eternal peace. Because,
yeah, eternal.
right? Because it also has a theological element of it. Okay. So anyway, he's taken as somebody who is an advocate of cosmopolitanism, a global civil society, and so forth. My take is, I'm not saying that all of them are wrong, but I think there is a powerful element or a counter reading of Habermas would be that how actually he has also been a philosopher, not of consensus, but a philosopher of what is called combat concept, and also a philosopher who has supported war. So, combat concept is a term which was given by a German philosopher called Reinhard Koselleck. Okay, so what it means, I mean, Jacques Derrida also described Habermas as a philosopher of consensus. Okay, so this is the one way of reading, but combat concept is that there are many kind of concepts that we as intellectuals or students use it. Combat concept is one which, instead of generating understanding, it establishes enmity. Okay, so for example, Reinhard Koselleck, he gives the example that when we in the European history, the word or the term heathen, okay,
Heathen. The
heathen,
yeah.
it is not a neutral term. It is a combat concept, because the assumption is that hidden is something which is not a desirable category or entity. It needs to be converted.
Yes.
Okay. So, like where, for example, terrorism is not a neutral concept.
No.
Okay. So it is a combat term, because the moment you use it, and I have said in the article that you mentioned that how, if you particularly analyze the statement of Habermas on Israel-Palestine, he is far from a philosopher of consensus. His entire thing, because as we have already talked about it, he dehistoricizes it. Okay. And if he's really a philosopher of democracy and public debate, okay, then nowhere he says that actually Hamas and other people, Hamas came to power through a democratic election, by the way.
Mhm.
It had won.
Mhm.
Okay. And even it is Western observers who found the election very fair. Okay. So in his statement, you don't see so much of consensus, but a theory of or a enactment of uh, enmity. And this, by the way, is, although in his formal writings, Habermas says that he has been opposed to Carl Schmitt, who was, of course, a Nazi philosopher.
Mhm.
And his politics was of enmity, because he said that, in the concept of the political,
Yeah. Yeah.
that politics is about distinguishing friends from enemies.
Yeah.
So he does say that his version of politics is opposed to Carl Schmitt's notion of politics, but in practice and in their statement on Israel and Palestine, you see the same kind of enmity politics that he is enacting.
Yeah.
So that is one point. Also, just to recall, in 1991, he justified the Gulf War.
Habermas.
Okay, Habermas in 1991.
I didn't know. Okay. Well, it, it does make sense for people in
And
that school of thought.
And he, I mean, of course, Saddam Hussein, he did all kind of nasty things, okay? But he is describing Saddam Hussein as new face of fascism. So my point is, this is like exporting the German history, okay? I mean, of course, we can debate about to what extent, so this is in no way to defend Saddam Hussein. Of course, he was brutal and so on and so forth. But the manner in which he's reading it, new face of fascism, even we talked about it, how Nasser was described as new Hitler or new Mussolini, right? So of course, these are the brutal, I mean, Saddam's state was brutal, but let us not forget about the fact that it has also been supported by the West.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
And
so in 1991, he supported the Gulf War. Now he also uh, justified the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001
yeah,
after 9/11.
no surprise.
Okay.
You know,
And then, and something we should note about, because this will go finally to the question of universalism. When Iraq was invaded in 2003,
mhm.
okay, now I was there in Amsterdam. I was doing my PhD. So you remember there were massive demonstration across Europe
Yeah, there were
against the,
actually. Yeah, yeah.
right, in New York, in Amsterdam, and so on and so forth. So I think it was Habermas, Jacques Derrida, and that Italian philosopher who died, mm, Calvino. So these three people, they published one joint statement. Okay. And this was published in German, Spanish, and French, and so on. I've written about it. Some people say that no, although Derrida's name appears there, but the text doesn't have any semblance of ideas from Jacques Derrida. Anyway, the point of this is that he did oppose But then we have to see what is the ground of Habermas's opposition
Mm-hmm.
of the 2003 invasion of Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
So, Iris Young, she was a famous political scientist based in Chicago. She wrote a critique of that because there, Habermas is saying that, look, as you know, after World War II, um, uh, Habermas himself, as many people know, his youth was in support of fascism. He
Mm-hmm.
was part of the Hitler's youth.
Yeah.
But after 1945, he gets very much oriented towards America.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but also philosophically, his reliance on Talcott Parsons, Richard Rorty, and so on and so forth. But in this case, he says that, look, Europe has to position itself against America, okay, against this is about 2003 invasion of Iraq, okay. So he presents the whole drama as if there are only two actors in the world. On the one hand, there is America, and then there is Europe. Now, what he says in that statement that the Europe has to come together, okay. Now, this is also part of the European Union kind of thing, that there are other members of the existing European members and the aspiring ones. So he says that the Europe is based on this Judeo-Christian identity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
A
he's
very
talking,
loaded term, yeah.
right. And by the way, the term, the description of Western civilization as Judeo-Christian civilization, it did not exist before World War II. It is only after World War II that it is hyphenated Judeo-Christian. Before that, it was simply either Western civilization or simply civilization or Christian civilization. It is only after World War II that it is added. And
The history of that term itself would be worth an entire episode, because I'm pretty sure it
right.
has to do very closely to do with the Zionist project. But let's leave that aside for now. Please finish your point.
Yeah, so the point is, many defenders of Habermas, they say that, of course, he opposed the invasion of Iraq in 2003,
Mm-hmm.
which is true, but then the ground of opposition is not explained. And then, if we are really talking about a cosmopolitan democracy, a new world based on rule and discussion, then his opposition is simply pitted like, okay, America is not, the action is not good. So Europe has to be mobilized and presented as the leader of the world. But then the question is, what is the role and place of the entire non-Western world?
Yeah. Of
Okay,
course, it just doesn't figure. It's just not in there in the thinking of these of people like Habermas.
right. And as you know, as an anthropologist, I'm also very curious about the fact that when the word international community is used,
Mm-hmm.
so when we use the phrase international community, I always wonder, do we think about what people in Chile thinks, or what people in Kenya thinks, or in Papua New Guinea?
No,
No.
no,
I
of
mean,
course not.
technically, right?
The West understands itself as the world. Whenever they talk about the world, they talk about themselves. They talk about the Europe and North America. That's how they understand. Plus the leftover colonies, Australia, New Zealand, maybe the honorary whites, the Japanese, right? That's still the mentality. And I'm sorry, we're getting it's a little bit polemic here, but you find such statements just so often, and you find them even you find the left out, the people who are left out of the thinking. You find it everywhere. You find it in Habermas, or well, you don't find it in Habermas, and that's the whole problem.
Right. So back to your question, I think from 30 years down the line, how he will be um, remembered, or how people will interpret, and so on and so forth. But these points about the fact that how he has been also supportive of war about Afghanistan. If you see his statement, it is also deeply Orientalist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the same thing like, women are, not having freedom and so on and so forth. But okay, that is fine. But is it possible only through invasion? You know, uh,
Yeah.
and and if you're really concerned about women's freedom, why didn't you speak about it 5 years ago?
And
You know,
why did you never mention it in context with the absolute monarchy which we know as Saudi Arabia? Why is it that only one group of countries gets that treatment and the other one like gets a pass? It's like we don't talk about them. That's this this agenda setting, whether it is explicit or implicit, and whether it is aware or unaware. But the Western world is a master in this kind of exercise of trying to set the agenda. And Habermas was definitely part and parcel of that.
well, you mentioned Saudi Arabia. It might be useful. 2 or 3 years ago, UAE gave him a prize, which is called Zad Medal or something. This is from UAE. And you know what was the amount? It was 100,000 dirham in the local currency. Uh, and I think it will probably come to American dollars, 300,000 or something.
Wow.
Now, this is very interesting. Just and it is for I think it is called ZAD award, and it is not just for one particular kind of work, but for his lifelong contribution, right? Now, the story of this thing is that, of course, he was nominated, and this is something which is done based on prior consultation. And in this case, his publisher was also involved. So he had indirectly accepted it, but 2 or 3 days before receiving the award, he issued a statement that he is going to refuse it. Okay? And then the question is, what is the reason? And then he says that, well, UAE and the government, there is not in favor of human rights. But then the point is, as a philosopher who speaks about universalism, didn't you know this before? Okay. So, and in the German press, actually, there were some news items that actually Habermas was very greedy. He accepted it because it is 1 million dirham in the local currency. So, when such news came in one interpretation, this forced him to decline it at 11th hour. Okay, so then it also means like what kind of commitment you have. I mean, what kind of rational debate and openness exist from your own parameter in the society or in the polity from which you receive this prize.
Right. No, the um Habermas and the Western philosophy, I think, is something that we still need to talk about quite a bit, because I do think it helps us understand some of the very very deeply ingrained thought processes in the West, and that just we need to somehow grapple with, and is in this multipolar world. Um, I knew this would be a difficult discussion, because whenever you go into philosophy, you have to branch out into a lot of things. But we need to come to an end. Is there something that we haven't mentioned yet that you think is really important, or did we more or less do justice to the criticism that you wanted to convey?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, just to clarify the kind of critical discussion that we had, from this, it should not be concluded that, well, we are not appreciative of the worth of his intellect or philosophy. So the point is not that his contribution is insignificant. Of course, he wrote extensively. His contribution as public intellectual, okay, is tremendous. And as I already mentioned, this was something that I was very impressed working as senior research fellow at Max Planck in Germany. The kind of aura, if you want to use that word, when he used to speak, people used to come to listen to him. You know, there's also something very interesting about Germany, that the name of the streets, they are named after philosophers like Goethe Street, Immanuel Kant Street. You know, so this is a good thing of which Habermas was a product. I mean, by the way, he also studied in Göttingen. Um, uh, you know, so I also have some memory, like in terms of being in the same town. His daughter Rebecca, she was also teaching at University of Göttingen. So anyway, this is not to dismiss him entirely. What the whole point is that of course he made a tremendous contribution, especially to the debate on public sphere and so on and so forth. But also giving a philosophical orientation to the public discussion.
Yes.
So in many ways, he was critical of positivism, like this data as deity kind of approach. This statisticalization of reasoning. Okay, so these are important things which he contributed to. The point of this conversation is that while we should be definitely attentive to the tremendous contribution that he has made, we have to read him critically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is important because without a critical reading, our knowledge will not advance. So many people talk about, for example, and this is a good point, like colonization of life world.
Yes.
Okay. So how this, in Habermas's term, market and state, they are infringing on our autonomous life. Okay. So colonization of life world by system. This is Habermas's thought. The point is, we have to be appreciative of the contribution that Habermas has made. So the purpose of this critical conversation is not to dismiss his contribution, including a very useful concept of the colonization of life world by the system. Okay, but, and this is a big but, we cannot talk about colonization of the life world by system. And Habermas's focus is, by the way, the rich Western countries. Okay, we cannot be fully appreciative of this concept unless we also relate it to the real colonization, which is not something which has happened 3 centuries ago, but in the case of Palestinian, there is a real colonization.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about colonization of life world by system and you keep silence, if you maintain an eerie silence about the real colonization, then I have to ask the question that what kind of philosophy are you promoting?
And I think this is a very, very important point to make. And I thank you also for this recommendation to basically read Habermas as an ethnic thinker in order to kind of understand that ethnic group, which I think is something that also from the global south might be valuable to understand how the Europeans understand themselves, although we impose that, of course, a lot. Thank you very much. This was most interesting. People who want to read your work, where should they go to find you?
Well, so I have a website which is called irfanahmad.org. And most of my writings are also available. I put it on academia.edu. So maybe I can send you the links later on,
Yes.
including the link of this essay about which we had the discussion.
Please send me all of this. The description will be the links will be in the description box below. Professor Irfan Ahmad, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Pascal. It was lovely having this conversation.